Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 6, 2025 Scarborough Board of Education meeting. Ray, can we call the attendance, please?
Yes.
Hmm.
Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Ms. Leon,
Here.
Ms. Lindstrom,
Here.
Ms. Peterson,
Here.
Rockenstein,
Here.
Mr. Pinion,
Here.
Mr. King Huff,
Here.
Ms. Ledger,
Here.
Ms. Westino.
Here.
All right, thank you so much. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so much. Agenda item 5.0 is a consent agenda, just for our information. The February resignations, retirements, and new hires are in our meeting material that Cheryl has put together with us, so no action there. Agenda item 6.0 are adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening?
There are none.
Agenda item 7.0 is the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. So this evening, I wanted to start out by just sharing with you and with the public some key communications that went out today. By now, I think all of you are aware that we had an evacuation at the Wentworth School today. And I just want to start by saying how appreciative and thankful I am of the quick response, not just from our school staff, but also from our public safety partners. I think that although an event like we experienced today is certainly not one that we look forward to, it certainly in my mind is one in which we should feel pride because I think we rallied together. We work really hard as a concerted team. And if you watch the press conference today, which I have linked here as well, I think Fire Chief Kindlen made reference to that, that we do work collectively together on such a regular basis that when an event or a crisis happens, as the evacuation at Wentworth was today, we are able to really work well together and people aren't tripping over each other. So a huge thanks to everyone involved for that. So just to kind of recap for folks, so basically we had about 120 third and fourth graders who were up on a set of risers on the stage in the Wentworth cafeteria. We had one student who seemingly fainted off of the risers. And then that precipitated other students expressing some concerns about respiratory symptoms, et cetera. Again, I have to say our public safety partners were very thorough in their response in checking the area very closely and carefully. They tested it for multiple types of gases, all of which came empty because they also had some mutual aid from other departments. They had another department go through and run the same tests as a secondary precaution to make sure that nothing had been missed. At this time, we are going to be going through and looking at the video of what that rehearsal was looking like and what transpired. But as I mentioned in the shared communication that was put out in a press release this afternoon, one of the things that we are looking at is we know that we had a concentrated number of students in a really small area. Certainly over the time in my career, I have known students to pass out when they are on risers. And so, that is something that we're exploring. And we're also thinking ahead to, is there a way to make sure that when we have a high number of concentrated students in a small area, are there some steps that we can take to provide, extra ventilation, fans, et cetera. Because I think, that can be a situation where the temperature can rise. We've got kids with lighting on them and lots of feelings about being in public and performing. So, that is another area that we are looking at, especially whereas our public safety partners deemed that there was nothing physically happening at the school that was of a concern to our students. I can move on unless there are questions about that.
No, just a comment. As a parent of a Wentworth student, I really appreciated the really clear, and I know it may not have felt prompt in the moment, but what was actually prompt communication that was ongoing throughout the day. So thank you.
You're welcome. And again, just as, pieces of information for the public, I did put in some of our key communications into that slide so that you can read the shared press release that we did in concert with our public safety partners, Mrs. Crosby's communication to Wentworth families, and then also the press conference that was held. So that if people are feeling like that they didn't hear all of the information, this is certainly another way to have that for yourself. Moving on, typical things that I would include in the superintendent's report. So in front of you, you have the enrollment as of February 28th. As you know, I've been providing this information to you on a monthly basis. And so again, if you want a comparison to how does this compare to January's end of month enrollment, we are up 3 additional students. And so I think that you've kind of seen, that we seem to be creeping along and sprinkling in a few more students each month. That has been the trend. So those are the numbers where we are at. And then I would just share with you information about our upcoming Professional Development Day. For those of you who are parents, you know that next Friday, March 14th, we are going to be having a Professional Development Day for staff. And so that means a no school day for students. As you know, we only have 2 of these days during the school year. And so this time is super precious for us in terms of planning professional development for staff. And the theme of the day next Friday is making content accessible. And the majority of the sessions that are being offered are being led by our own school staff. So we have staff from all levels that are going to be engaging their peers in a number of sessions. And I've kind of given you a smattering to help you get a sense of what's in the day. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but the types of things that people are going to have the choice of. And again, it is a choice-based day. So there are multiple sessions being offered and staff can select from those. But some of the offerings include support for specific applications and platforms that we use in the district with students, learning more about executive functioning supports, differentiation strategies, brain-based learning, using high-impact instructional strategies in the classroom, beginning to delve into ways that AI can be used responsibly in classrooms in accordance with some of the procedures that you've recently seen the IT director share with you, looking at neurodiversity and how to provide supports to a greater extent for our growing population of multilingual learners. So again, I just want to thank you. These kinds of days really are instrumental for us in ensuring that our staff have the time needed to support their professional growth because there just really are very limited opportunities for us, as you know, with our school calendar.
Thank you, Diane. Are there any questions for Diane? All right. agenda item 8.0 is the chair report. I have two things. First, I would like to piggyback on what you were saying, in your thanks to our community partners with the police department and the fire department. I think it's really, our partnership is really meaningful, and it allows us to prepare and plan for events when you can't really prepare and plan. And I really appreciate the hard work if you would pass that along for us. It's really helpful. It's hard to, today when there's a lot of information out and people are, understandably very nervous about what's going on. Your communication was really spot on and helpful to Freyla's point. And I really appreciate that. It's, as I was telling someone earlier, it's hard to say, take a deep breath, but know that your kids are in really, really good hands. And that's the important thing. That I hope is the takeaway for all of our families, is that our kids are in really, really good hands with our people here. And that is important to us as well. So thank you to you and to Ray and to the Kelly, of course, and Nate at the high school, everybody who worked. This was a big day. So thank you for that. The second thing I have is that the SBAC has decided they are not in a position to offer any new information at what should be our March 19th update, town council, school board update. They were just in front of us. Well, they were in the room with us at our workshop last week, and they're looking for, as you know, later on we get to it, they're looking for some direction from us tonight. And so they did not think that March 19th was a good day for a new update. So they've asked to bump to April. That meeting is a meeting that should be occurring with the town council meeting. So I have been in touch with Counselor Seither, and it looks like it will be April 2nd. So that is a tentative date, she says, but it looks like that is where they've likely landed. So March 19th is off, and April 2nd would be the new date for that. All right. Any questions for me?
You have an idea about what time?
Let me, hold on.
My mic
Apolog-
also just, I'm looking for the time of that meeting.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my, I apologize to look at my calendar, but usually we have it scheduled for 6 on the 19th, so I presume it would be the same. All right, agenda item 9.0 are committee reports, and we'll start with the building committee. So go to Alyssa and Jillian.
So the building committee has completed their first survey. It's now closed. We had 1,200 full responses with 23 paper responses and 613 partial. So a huge turnout and response for that. So we're excited to have that. We will have the full results on the 7th, and they'll be presented to the SBAC committee on the 10th. We are continuing efforts to refine the options and looking at ways to decrease costs while really trying to stress and respect the budget that we had received in the initial survey from the community on what they were willing to see in tax increases. For later discussion, I'll go further into depth with this, but the SBAC leadership and committee has asked for our guidance in how best to rank their benchmarking criteria in order to bring the BOE and the town council along with them in the process. As Shannon has just mentioned, we are bumping out the joint town council and BOE update to pending April 2nd. And then the other update is that Harriman did present to us a new AB option. It is a mix of 2 options that did pre-exist. And so there has been an initial option that has grown from the review. So We're gonna hopefully start to decrease our options on Monday, Monday and the following week, I believe it's the 10th and 17th. Excuse me, and vote on the 24th. So hopefully by the time that we are being updated as a board and a town council, we have been able to decrease some of the options. Anything to add?
I just wanted to highlight that, we're asking for this as another data point. We've collected information from the survey. We'll hear about that. The committee has their opinions. They, looking for feedback from the board, mostly on non-negotiables. I think, the idea being there's a lot that we really need to accomplish in this school project, but the committee needs to know that what they bring forward, the board will support. And so that they're asking for that information from us.
Is there any questions for Jillian or Alyssa? I have a question and an ask. My ask is when you get your survey report, can you please make sure the board and the council get that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we will have the information back tomorrow, but the committee will review it on Monday. So we will, I can send it along as soon
Yeah.
as we get it.
That would be.
Yeah, the other thing that I would just mention is, it is my understanding that Emily, our communications person from Harriman, is going to be taking that raw data and putting it in a more presentable format.
Perfect.
And so I guess that raises a question of, if it makes more sense to wait to share that when that format is
Mhm.
in that form versus just sending you raw data.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
for instance, we got like hundreds of comments, because as hopefully most of you saw, there were a number of places you could write in
Mhm.
an opinion or a comment. And so spread that over 1,800 or so people, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of comments. So we're gonna try to distill that down into categories of some sort too.
And-
So.
And if you'd like,
Yeah.
we can start with providing the data that Emily had or will be presenting to us as well. And then for any BOE or town council member that would like to see the more raw data, we can move that along as well.
Yeah, because I would like to take the time to read all the comments myself, and I imagine there's likely others, but I would also be interested in seeing Emily's report
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm.
That would be great. And then my question is, do I understand you that we now have an A option, a B option, all the others, and then an AB option?
Well, it's like these projects, as we get more information and we talk about things and we figure out what's going to work, they're sort of morphing and changing into maybe things that make a little more sense, or they kind of combine ideas.
Or-
I think
yeah.
Harriman has encouraged us all to, and community members as well, to really keep an open mind. And, we're working with what Scarborough has to offer. So we can't just make acreage. We can't just make option, there are certain things that, people, these options were designed and then we're asking them to cut back and we're asking them to find places where we can, get within our budgetary needs. So, there is the new option, but it's because of where the committee is growing to and looking at things. It's not that, it's kind of an out of the blue. It's more of something that has developed through the limitations that we're seeing, the asks that we're having, and the way the committee's growing, more so than just another new option. But
And
yes, it does carry a new name.
Yeah, and again, it comes from direct asks from members of the committee to Harriman, right?
Yeah.
So as a point of clarity, Harriman is not saying, hey, have you thought about this? People are making specific requests. Can you show us what it would look like if we did X, Y, Z?
Yeah, which I think is great. I appreciate that the committee is thinking that way. Let me rephrase a little bit. Do we still have option A on the table? Did the committee vote to remove option A and B and in its place we have AB?
No.
No.
Okay.
So no options have been eliminated.
Again.
We're waiting to hear back from the committee, the community, because that is very important. We need the community to be brought along with us. We're waiting to hear back from today's discussion regarding our benchmark priorities, see what the board is finding, because again, we want to bring the board along with us and the town council. So, we are holding off on eliminating anything until we have more data.
Got it. Thank you. All right, next is our communications committee.
Oh, all right. So, we met this morning, and, we're continuing to work on the senior citizen appreciation dinner. I have some flyers here that Ray got printed out today. If anybody would kindly take one to put up in a location that maybe seniors would frequent, that would be great. If, maybe in your community or in a grocery store, or coffee shop, wherever you might go. We are so basically looking for help getting the word out. It is in the community services book, but and it's on Facebook. It will be a recurring ad on Facebook. But, just getting the word out to our senior members who may not look on Facebook, or maybe they don't use the community services as much, but registrations don't close until the 1st. We have 100 spaces available. And if anybody has any idea for door prizes, any business that would be willing to donate, we would love for you to go out and get that. Or let us know what your idea is. We are just continuing to work on the updates in the newsletters, getting things out in both of those. And of course, always looking for more information. If there's something that you feel like would be good to share, we are happy to make sure that happens. And just looking for any feedback if you feel like what we're putting out there is helpful or useful or not. That's pretty much it.
So thank you. Are there any questions for Jillian? All right, next is curriculum. I'll hand it over to Jenna.
Yep, so we have not met, but we are meeting March 20th at 8 a.m. tonight. We are planning to discuss some curriculum review, hot topic, digital citizenship and digital literacy, just kind of what does that look like. And Katie Vitro is also going to be going over K through 5 social studies, K through 5 ELA, K through 12 world language and STEM curriculums, and then have an overview of winter and spring assessments.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jenna? Jenna, I'm really interested in hearing what comes of the digital citizenship and literacy. That's the area when we talked, when we've been, talking consistently about cell phone policy since June. That is the area where I think we can make the most difference as it relates to addiction and cyberbullying and access to inappropriate material, and on, right? That's where I think the biggest, where we have the most opportunity to affect change there. So I'm really interested to hear about that.
Yeah,
in more
likewise.
detail.
I mean, I know our students get this curriculum, but I think it'd be helpful to hear what that actually looks like for our families, to see what is this content that they're receiving about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you want to keep going, finance?
Let's do it. So we met just this last Monday. It was an interesting conversation, but the first thing is a good update. So Derigo, am I saying that correctly? Our contracted bus company, they have offered to purchase 3 of our aging buses. So historically, the aging buses go off to auction, and apparently we don't get a whole lot of money out of it. But Derigo has offered to purchase 3 of them for $10,000, I believe I wrote down. And we don't have to go through any sort of process to vote on it or anything. We feel like this is a great thing. give us more money, please. And then we got a budget process update. So some of the things for budget every year, our budget drivers are the anthem rates. And right now, we currently have an open collective bargaining contract that's being discussed with the teachers. So those are driving up our budgets at the moment. And it seems as though not much new is going to be added to this year's budget. So the amount that's going to be presented is to sustain current operating conditions. So we'll be interested to hear about all of the things that are going to go in it at our budget workshops, which are coming up. So March 18th from 4 to 7 at the Wentworth School, and March 19th from 8:30 to 11 at Town Hall.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions or any comments? Okay. Rayla, negotiations?
So as Jenna just mentioned, we're in ongoing negotiations with our professional services contract, affectionately known as our teachers contract, which is our biggest agreement, and that goes ongoing. Obviously, our board goal is to complete this contract by the end of the school year. There's a couple other smaller agreements that we also are gonna, I think, start to try to work on. Ideally, we do one at a time, but sometimes, especially as we are looking at spring, we need to get going on all of them.
All right, any questions for Freyla? All right, I'm gonna carry on with policy.
So our last policy meeting was just before this meeting. So we just had it. We reviewed the 25-26 calendar, which is going to be up later for vote. You're going to see the Title IX policies, don't shudder in horror quite yet, back on the agenda next meeting. There has been a change. There's been a legal process that has changed the implementation of that policy. And so it will be a relatively, given our last votes, painless process to revert back to what would be congruent with current law, as what our current policies are now out of line with law, even though when we voted them in, they were in line with law. So we need to do that. So don't be aware, they're going to come back, I think, probably bundled together. It's going to be relatively quick. We're not going through each policy again. And that's 6 months of our policy meeting time we can't get back. We also had a couple other policies we're looking at, the school facilities, which was brought forward by our facilities director. And we're looking at our student transportation policy. And then we're going to start looking at policies. So my right column of upcoming policies is a very blank, not all those lovely B column is gone. Diane in the last 2 years has done an amazing job putting together all of our policies, noting which ones are mandatory, which ones are optional, and the date at which we have last reviewed them. We are going to switch to a reverse chronological process to review the oldest policies first, bringing them forward instead of going through an alphabetical order. And that way, my hope is that we will be able to bring our policies back up. We will get all of them into the 2000s, because believe it or not, we have a 1983 policy from the year 1983 that needs to be reviewed. And we're going to, I know, it's a long time ago. So we're going to go through those and bring them up to date. Were you born yet?
Mitchell, were you born?
Were you born yet?
I was born in 2003.
There you go.
Oh my God.
There you go. We're going to make sure all those policies come back into after you were born. That'll be our new benchmark.
My freshman year.
Beautiful. The 80s were a great decade,
Mm.
Mitchell, I'm just saying.
All right, are there any questions for Freyla? Okay, agenda item 10.0 are liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports this evening?
Briefly, I'm not going to go through all of the many pending bills in the legislature, but the legislature is cranking right now. This is prime season to have public hearings and workshops on bills. Some very hotly contested in Scarborough items are up, most notably, and don't shudder or kill the messenger, but there's a very big push for school start times at the statewide level. The board here is not involved in that conversation. But the statewide officers are, so that nobody's caught unawares. If you have thoughts on that, you should absolutely reach out to your representative and share your feelings with them. But that is one that definitely caught my eye. There's a few other policies But that's the one that there's a major push from a lot of powerful figures within the legislature to get that through, led by the Speaker of the House.
I'm sorry to clarify, that's literally the state would be dictating when schools stop, all.
It would be an 8:30 start time. High school would start no earlier than 8:30.
Thank you.
I would encourage you to reach out to your representatives about your feelings on this policy.
I'll just piggyback on this a little bit. There's another bill that's floating out there that is sponsored by Senator Brenner, who is one of our senators, and it's a bill to start a cell phone pouch program, for lack of a better word. There's not a name, they're not calling it a Yonder pouch program, but a pouch program where districts can apply for a grant to outfit their district in a pouch to lock cell phones in during the school day so that you would, have a bell-to-bell ban. It does carry a $250,000 price tag, and with the funding at the state level, the way it is, I don't anticipate that it's going to grow legs this year, but I keep watching. Freyla is watching. If we see anything, we're happy to bring that forward. And then I have talked very briefly with Freyla, but I haven't circled back around. I'm interested in us really working on developing a better relationship with our state elected officials. When things like this happen, like the start time, for example, which another one of our local our state officials elected officials has signed on to that. I would love to have a really good, robust working relationship where they reach out to us and ask what our thoughts are. How would this impact Scarborough? And so I'm interested in us really sitting down, and Freyla as the liaison, legislative liaison, and me as the chair, just figuring out how we can really develop that relationship. Does it look like they come to, maybe we invite them to a yearly workshop? Do we sort of, how do we make sure we're all working really cohesively together is what I'm interested in driving at. So more to come on that. All right. Any other reports or questions or comments?
I spoke with Counselor Donovan today, and there really aren't a lot of things on the forefront for the council. Obviously, their biggest concern is the budget process, which they will be partnering with us once again, though, to have roundtables and some other things. So
Good.
the board and the council will be our biggest thing.
Yeah.
Upcoming. And of course, the school project, but
Yeah.
no surprises there.
Thank you. All right, agenda item 11.0, our student reports. So I'll turn it over to Grace and Abby.
So the middle schoolers, at the beginning of February had a band and chorus concert, which is pictured above. And then also at the middle school, 8th graders engaged in a presentation and Q&A with award-winning author Neil Schusterman. And then at the high school, members of Oak Hill Players put on a production of Frankenstein this past weekend. And then this upcoming weekend, they will be performing at the Maine One Act Festival.
So last weekend was Maine's Robotics VEX State Championship, where the high school robotics club competed. And one of the Scarborough teams, 344R, won an award called the Innovate Award, which recognizes an effective design process for a novel aspect of the team's robot design. And also 3 Scarborough High School students won awards from an organization called NCWIT, which recognizes women in computing and technology. And also the computer science and robotics teacher, Miss Avery, was recognized as Maine's educator award. So those are pictures from the robotics meet. So in the left picture, the robot on the right is my team's robot. So yeah.
That's awesome. Great. So how did you play? How did the teams place?
so two of our teams made it to like the qualifying rounds, but we lost in like quarterfinals. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But so one team still won the award, which is cool.
Very cool. And then did you have anything from your state board meeting today?
Today we discussed mental health and like what schools can do to like better address the needs of students. So yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Did you talk about, just out of curiosity, did you talk about cell phone addiction, cyberbullying, anything I mentioned earlier specifically, or was it more of a general?
We didn't talk about like phones. We talked more about like access for support for students. So like how can we create better programs to like help educate like students like where they can go to get help or like who they can go to get help with. So yeah. It wasn't as much of like a phone.
Yeah.
Phones weren't really brought
More
up.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. That's awesome. All right, any questions or comments for the student reps? All right. Agenda item 12.0 is general public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make general public comment about anything not on the agenda this evening? Do you have anybody? All right, seeing none, I will close general public comment. I would like to call an audible, just because, and I would love to be able to allow our deputy chief to leave after his presentation. So even though I didn't ask for this earlier, if everybody is in agreement, I would like to flip 13.1 and 13.2 and allow the allow us to hear the police presentation first so that he can go back to work or go home and then we can carry on. Is that acceptable? Okay. All right. So then our 13.1 is the Scarborough Police Department body cams presentation. So we'd love to welcome you to the front.
I just wanted to start off by thanking you very much for the kind words at the beginning of the meeting and also let you know how much all of our public safety team values the working relationship that we have with the school department. And we know how much of a difference that makes with the service that we're able to provide. So thank you. I also appreciate the opportunity tonight to speak to you a little bit about our body worn camera program that we've just started to deploy. Just some background to start, but the following slides or the initial slides are a lot of background information. I'll go through those fairly quickly, but if there are any questions during those, please feel free to stop me at any time. As far as background, the initial push for the cameras, both body worn cameras and we're deploying at the end of the month cruiser cameras, came from our staff at the police department. The cameras themselves have existed since the late 1990s, going back in history again. And over the years, they have not only become much better in their technology, but also they've become much more common and much more accepted and have become an industry standard for us to meet as much as anything. We're one of the few departments in Southern Maine that before this program did not possess either body worn or cruiser cameras. Dating myself again, going back to VHS tapes, the department back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had cruiser cameras that we deployed, but the technology at that time just wasn't that good and not probably about 5 years after we had them, we disbanded the program. I think the push by our staff to have the cameras also spoke a lot about the idea of the need and that they saw the value in the product and they also saw that in order to meet the standards both of not only the community but what the courts were requiring, we needed to move forward with this process. We started out with a needs assessment and right through the whole process, we included the town IT department to make sure that we were looking at not only appropriate technology to meet our needs, but also technology that met security needs and needs for the future. Once we developed that needs assessment, we reached out to all of the manufacturers that made body cameras. We narrowed down to 3 different companies that met all of the needs that we had identified. And then we did demonstrations and actual field demonstrations with their products. And this took place over about a 2 to 3 year period. And then this past year, we were able to put together a CIP project that we presented to the town council, went through the town council budget process, and then because of the dollar amount needed to be approved by the voters, which took place in November of this past year. Since that time, we've been working to get training policy together, order equipment, get everything in and outfitted, which in and of itself has been a process. Some of the justification for the equipment, risk management for officer safety, and some of the different things that the cameras provide, including GPS location, support of testimony for officers and key witnesses in courtroom criminal proceedings, so that materials available. It's like I mentioned, it's become a standard that's expected when cases go to the DA's office. They don't turn them away without that video evidence, but they certainly they don't look at them as highly without that evidence. Provides increased transparency with our citizens when it's material that we can release publicly. Also assists with employee performance evaluations and training. Part of our policy is a program where supervisors randomly review at least 2 recordings a month for the officers that are assigned to their team for training, not only training and evaluation purposes, but if there are equipment needs, sometimes those are identified in those reviews, or will be as well. Benefits of the camera system, officer safety. One of the features of the body worn cameras is they have the ability for live streaming, both audio and video, something that isn't used day in and day out, but in a crisis situation that an officer's involved in, if they need help, it allows dispatch to tune in, see what the officer is seeing through their camera. If they can't communicate or if they can't use their hands, it also allows for audio for those officers to communicate back to dispatch and for them to have an idea of what's going on and what help is needed at that time. Also, risk management, as I mentioned, with policy compliance. And as the supervisors review that video, they look for the officer's compliance with all of our department policies. Some benefits of the camera system, as I mentioned, with the courtroom procedures. At one time, the cameras and the quality of the footage, our district attorney's office actually didn't necessarily look for that video footage, and was even at times critical of it because it didn't show the detail in some of the cases that the officers were bringing forward. But today, our district attorney is not only supportive, but has been critical of departments that do not have the technology deployed. Also, the increased public transparency. If there is video footage that can be released, and I'm sure everyone here has seen it at different times in the news media, that there's that public expectation now that if there is footage and it is available to the public, that people feel that they have a right and should be able to see that footage. The next slide is some of the different ways that the benefits come through with the cameras in different types of calls, like traffic stops. Most of the work with the cameras where they use regularly will be our patrol division for traffic stops, high-risk calls, use of force situations, vehicle pursuits with the cruiser cameras, and then interactions with mental health substance use calls that potentially are could be violent calls. The next few slides were just for background on other agencies in the area that already have deployed. This list is the list of the agencies with both cameras that they're being used currently. The next one is the agencies that are just using cruiser cameras. And then agencies with only body worn cameras in our area. As I mentioned, Scarborough PD before this program was the only agency in Cumberland County that had not deployed either at least one of the camera systems, and that they're also prevalent throughout law enforcement, and a tool that's become not only accepted but expected. In 2024, the Catherine Cutler Institute did a survey. The results, 77% of law enforcement agencies in Maine reported out. Of those, 70% used body-worn cameras at that time. 21% were considering body-worn cameras, and 8% were neither using nor considering using the cameras at that time. And that was up from 48% 3 years prior to that. So school resource officers and body-worn cameras. The policy that we have, our agency is accredited through the Maine Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. Part of that accreditation is all of our policy need to meet accreditation standards, which include our body-worn camera policy. The cameras are only activated when responding to calls for criminal conduct, either interviewing victims or witnesses or interviewing suspects in those cases. When the cameras are activated, there's a slide coming up after this one that has a picture, but when the camera's activated, you'll see what the camera looks like and how distinct it is that the camera has been activating and is recording at that time with the lights on the face of the camera. There is no recording in any areas where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy by individuals. The officers either, if they don't have the cameras off, they by policy can also remove the cameras from their position on them and put them into their pockets or store them in some other manner if they need to be in those areas. Persons being recorded are informed as soon as practical and safe to do so. And the only time that wouldn't be immediately is if the officer was responding to a crisis type of call, which included some sort of altercation or violence where they may not be able to immediately let individuals know that they're recording at that time. The next slide actually shows a picture of the camera. And then if it's turned on and recording, the red lights on the face of the camera are on at that time. Our SROs, anytime the camera is turned on and activated, those lights come on. The only way those lights can be turned off is either to turn the camera off, or there is a stealth mode after the camera is turned on that is only to be used by policy in a situation where the officer is in an officer safety situation. A good example of that would be an overnight with a suspect in a building where the officers are searching the building for the suspect, and that while they're doing that search, that they don't want to be detected before they can detect the person that they're looking for. As far as the crime reports and just some statistics related to the schools and our SROs that go with that, since September 1st of 2024 up to February 27th, the high school, we had one report that was a criminal report that our SRO responded to in the high school and potentially would have used the body-worn camera device. And at the middle school, our middle school resource officer in our reports management system, there were 3 reports that potentially that the equipment might have been used or would have been used in those situations. Also keep in mind that if interviews are taking place, no matter who the individuals are, those interviews are taking place in private areas. They're not in public areas. They're being done, whether they're individuals that are witnesses or victims or suspects. If it's a juvenile involved in a situation that is a potential suspect, it involves contact with the parents and communication with them prior, and the ability for them to be present at any of those interviews. And some of those situations, even out of these 4 total since September of last year, that reporting and those actions may have taken place at the police department as opposed to at the school when they were reported. So, and we have, I think it shows a picture as far as the criminal reports. And I think one of the things that's very difficult in our line of work is proving a positive sometime. And I think a lot of this goes to the fact that we are consistently involved with the schools in rule violations and being present for safety and security in the schools, and that there are a lot of things that we hope don't happen because of our presence and the work that we do in partnership with the schools. Recording security, the evidence from the recordings is uploaded to a cloud storage called evidence.com. One of the real benefits of this is that through our IT department, it's unlimited cloud storage, and not only our officers' video recordings, but if we're meeting with people, whether it's at the schools or in the community taking reports, now we can give people or groups of people even push out a public link that if people have pictures, video recordings, if people are submitting written statements and want to do it electronically, that they can submit that evidence that becomes part of the case right through this portal, and it attaches all of that evidence to the case itself. As far as the recordings themselves, we follow the Maine Freedom of Access Act, and just how those, especially with criminal cases, the Maine Freedom of Access Act, if there's a case that's criminal in nature and it's being investigated, all of the information, including the reports, are considered private information. The only thing that people have access to is if somebody makes a statement, they have the access to their own statement. And then they also, if somebody is charged in a crime, officially charged through the courts, they have access to any of the evidence through discovery in the courts during that process after they're charged. But any information, including if we have a case that we've investigated with no suspects, it's still considered an open case, and that information is still considered private. And even if we've charged somebody that the DA's office has decided to no complaint, that case is still considered open, and that information isn't public information. If there is public information that is included in recordings, the program that we purchased also includes redaction tools, where if there's a portion of a video that is available and we're told needs to be made available to the public, then we can do that by making only that portion of the video available. I know that's a lot of information. Any questions?
All right, do you have any questions? Were you raising your hand? Were you going to raise your hand? And
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Jenna, if you have questions too, just let us know. Okay, go ahead.
So I understand you're talking about the Freedom of Information Act and how these are public records at some point. So if the case is closed after a case has been resolved, these become public records. How do we make sure that our kids' information and images are private if they're captured on these videos?
The public information as far as the criminal cases, and if somebody's charged, that's only available to the person that's charged as far as part of their rights to know all the information that the state has available. It's not public information. As far as the information, if there are portions that are public information, I think that the freedom of access laws protect the part of the information that you're talking about that protects students and their family, that it wouldn't be able to be made public. We also, any of the cases where there's a question about whether material can be released or not, we initially deny that request. And then the person certainly has a right to have that information reviewed by a judge. We'll go into court, a judge will review that information. If the judge orders that that information is public and needs to be released, then we certainly will release it. But unless we feel confident that it's public information, we wouldn't release it without being told that it's something we need to do.
Yeah, but police reports are public information after the case is either resolved or if a case is not brought. So at some point, police records become public information. These would be part of those records. And so I just want to make sure our parents and our citizens are extremely aware that our children's images are likely to be made public at some point. They're not protected once they become part of a police report that's public.
Okay, I'm not sure what information, if the case, are you saying if a criminal case was brought to a resolution and somebody was convicted?
That would be one way that the case is over, but if no charges are brought and the case is done, the case does not remain open forever. If the case is forwarded to the DA's office for charges and they either no complaint it or they prosecute it, in certain instances, those are public. Juveniles have some protection, but adults would not. So if this case pertained to an adult in this setting, these would become public records.
Yes. Yep, and that information, if it's, I guess I'm trying to think of an example of what you might be referring to as far as becoming public record.
Sure, if you had a case against an adult in this system, and in that investigation, during your investigation, you activated the body worn camera and it captured images of children who were in the school during the course of that investigation. Once that charge was finally disposed of, those reports become public information. So it's possible that these images could become public at some. I'm not anti body worn camera, but I also want people to be fully aware that these images can be made public in certain instances and will, maybe not in Scarborough, but at some point school images will become part of the public discourse when they're captured as part of information that's public records.
Yeah. I guess the only thing else I would say to that is with the recording devices that already exist in the public areas of the school, if somebody was to make that request and successfully be able to challenge in court that it was public record and it was ordered to be released, that would, all of that information or whatever information was ordered could be released.
My disagreement with that would be the school department's records are covered by FERPA in a way that the police records are not.
Okay.
So there are layers of here. That's my biggest concern.
Can I ask a question off of that?
Yeah.
Like if the body worn camera is turned on and you have like someone specific that you're interviewing or anything like that, but there are students walking in the background and things like that, would those people be redacted because they're not involved in, or they're just part of the footage?
Yes, and I think our officers are also, and even before our body worn cameras, if it's a crime that's been reported and our officers are speaking to whether it's a victim or witnesses or somebody who's suspected of committing the crime, that they are aware and that they're doing those interviews in private locations, not in public locations where other students might be at the time.
Following up on that, when in your policy do officers turn the camera on? So at what point during an investigation do they get turned on?
If during a criminal investigation, if the officers are, I guess it depends on the situation. If a crime's being reported to an officer and they're taking a criminal report and they're interviewing the victim of the crime or a witness or the suspect, they would record those interviews when they took place.
And so the camera wouldn't be during the entire investigation, but just when they're doing the interviews? Or would it, like if they're responding to a scene, would it be on recording that entire time?
The only time it would be activated at a scene would be if it was a scene that was a crime was taking place in their presence and that recording that scene might be beneficial to the prosecution of the crime.
And it would be up to the officer to activate that system. It's not gonna passively activate or like
No.
they have to physically trigger it to start.
Yep, it takes double pressing the front of the camera to start it and then holding it for a minimum of 3 seconds to stop the recording.
Would children ever be interviewed on camera without parental consent? I know we said suspects' parents are called, but what about witnesses?
Same with witnesses. If they're juveniles and we're interviewing them, then we contact the parents as well. And they're aware of those situations. If they decline to have or want to be present for those interviews, they're always able to do that.
Can they decline to have their child interviewed?
Sure.
And they declined to have their child recorded.
With a victim or a witness, there's officer discretion there. A lot of times, if it's depending on the situation, if there are privacy concerns, then the officer will not record victim or witness in a suspect interview most often. And this is just in criminal cases that are being investigated, that a suspect would be interviewed. And even prior to these cameras, there's state laws, recent state laws as far as that require recordings of suspect interviews for certain types of crimes in order for us to even do the interviews now.
And then finally, I like your crime statistics. One at the high school and 3 at the middle school. That is we don't want to see any criminal reports in our schools, but those numbers are certainly nothing that raises alarm or concern for me. You seem to indicate that those would be the 3 times the videos may be used during the course of investigation. Were there more investigations that went forward, but that may not have resulted in, they may have discovered there was no crime or it wasn't actually actionable? Is there potential for more recording? Because this definitely indicates like there's not going to be that much recording going on during that.
Right.
During the school day, because that's 4 incidents, that's a relatively discrete number. But would there be more information captured before you decide because you don't know in the course of investigation if something's going to be criminal or not. So would you likely be capturing more investigative materials and then using your discretion to decide how to process that information?
I was actually, some of the reports that go in was referring to that I only collected the information of the ones that potentially could have been recorded. Some of those calls out of the 4 could have been turned out to be not crimes prior to the officer at some point. And it may have been a point after some recording had taken place, or it may have been before any recording had taken place.
I'm just trying to get the scope of what it looks going to look like.
Sure.
Those are my questions.
How long is data stored for?
Depends on the type of recording. If it's a recording where an accidental recording or a recording that doesn't have value, it's a 30-day time period. But depending on the type of crime, if it's labeled for a type of crime, then it has to go through a process as far as to make sure that it's retained as long as it might be needed for court.
Thank you.
I just have 2 questions. The reasonable expectation of privacy, does the reasonable expectation of privacy supersede a crime? So in other words, if the SRO is responding to a potential criminal activity in, say, the locker room, that's a place where reasonable expectation of privacy exists. So would that supersede the criminal activity so that he would not be walking in the locker room recording?
Correct.
Okay.
And if there was a crime taking place in there, the SRO would not be recording at the time of the response to the area where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. If the officer could eliminate all reasonable expectation of privacy, if it was an area that was deemed that there was nobody there and there was no reasonable expectation of privacy existed anymore, but there was evidence of a crime there, then just like an evidence technician going in and taking photos of a crime scene, the officer may take still photos with their equipment, whether it's their body-worn camera or another camera.
Okay. And then my second question is the stealth activity with the camera. I can't, I'm trying to think and I can't come up with a reasonable opportunity for that to be used in the school setting, but is there something that you can think of in which that might be utilized at school?
Yeah, hopefully never, but if the officer was responding to an active shooter situation at the time and the person was in an area where the officer wanted to try not to be detected in that response is the only time I can think of.
I mean, if the school was in the process of being vandalized and officers were on the scene, they might, if they thought somebody was in the building, they might, if
I
it was
guess,
nighttime. Or it was
If
dark,
it
there's
was-
reasons to try to be evasive.
Yes, after hours. And I think that's one of the important things with this is that one of the points that's been highlighted through departments bringing on these programs is that an important aspect is consistency to the point where we've made the investment in cameras for all of our full-time officers instead of just a bank of cameras that officers can grab that may or may not be working. We've seen other agencies that have had even troubles technology-wise with cameras. Auburn, unfortunately, an officer-involved shooting where their technology just wasn't perfected yet, but it always brings into question with departments I know of all kinds of times departments have been questioned for not having a recording. I'm not aware of any times that departments have been scrutinized for having a recording.
All right, are there any other questions or thoughts? All right, thank you so much for coming. This has been really helpful and informative, and we appreciate you taking the time with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Agenda item 13.2 then would be the SBAC priority guidance. So just very quickly before I turn it over to Alyssa, this was a request that came from the SBAC chair asking for some guidance from the school board as to priorities, non-negotiables, things that we consider incredibly important for this building as they move forward. The committee is trying to wrap their arms around the solutions and what need, as they look at the cost of the solutions, what could possibly be eliminated to reduce the scope of the project. And so they're looking for some guidance from the board. So that's where we're at, but I am gonna pass it over to Alyssa to kind of tee up the conversation with the committee.
Sure. So that, going to repeat some of what Shannon said, but the SBAC committee has asked for the BOE to review the benchmarking criteria that the school board committee is using in order to compare the building options. At this time, we're also collecting a community survey and community opinion in order to use that in the evaluation process. So this is one of the pieces to be used. In order to ensure that we're addressing the specific requests of the committee, I did ask for a strong understanding of what the committee was requesting and in what structure the SBAC would like that feedback to be provided in. And the committee has asked that we rank the priorities if possible, request specific guidance on what we would like done about our portables, and asked to identify any of our non-negotiables in order for the BOE to support the building options that are on the list. That's kind of oh, go ahead.
Can you just repeat that third one? I'm not right.
Sure, absolutely. Identify any non-negotiables on the benchmarking list that would be an absolute requirement for us to support a building option. That was the ask that came from the committee. I will say that I have trouble with the idea of ranking in priorities when you look at the benchmarking criteria. Oh, sorry, is there something else? Okay. I'm happy to kind of identify some non-negotiables, but there are so many valuable things in the list that I personally don't know that I would feel comfortable ranking them in a 1 to 20 viewer or not, but happy to hear what others are feeling.
Very quickly, in your materials from Cheryl is there's a slide titled benchmarking slide. So that is the benchmarks that Alyssa is referring to. So if everybody wants to pull that up and have it available to them. It is there. Also in the materials is the governance document if anybody needed amendment to refamiliarize themselves with what we've asked them to do. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I make a request?
Mm-hmm.
Can we divide up sort of the ranking / non-negotiable slide work and the portable conversation? Because those look like two distinct conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be helpful for a little bit of background on the portables because we have a variety of portables and a variety of different ages of portables that are doing a variety of different things, which have a variety of different impacts on different schools. And so I know this is in the materials and you can go to the building website, which is available on the board's website, and you should do that to get every piece of information that we have available to the public, which is a lot of information. But it would be really helpful for me to do those conversations separately and then have a little background on portables, just so that I know where I should start opining.
Sure, I think that's totally reasonable. I will say, just as a note, the portables are on the criteria. So we'll just make a note to ourselves that when it comes to addressing the temporary classrooms under facility needs, we'll just have that.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have I feel like we might have two distinct asks, and I hear what Alyssa's saying. She's not necessarily comfortable personally ranking the benchmarking elements there. I think in my mind, it feels a little bit separate from non-negotiables. I think non-negotiables are the things we can't live without. So that's not a ranking. That's a, yes, we insist on having these items. Ranking to me is this would be nice, and 1 through 5. Right. So I'm not opposed to what you're saying by any stretch. I also, of course, worry, like I mentioned last week, I worry about us putting the thumb too much on the needle of this program. But at the same time, I want to provide the committee with enough guidance that they can, and feedback that they can get to a solution. We have to get to a solution. We can't keep spinning our wheels. And while the longer we do that, the more our kids are without. So I would like to be able to at least provide at least the non-negotiables for us. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not willing to rank non-negotiables, I think is what you're saying, which is I agree with, like ranking the wants or needs. I think we could do that, but I think you're going to get, if you just look at the board members, 7 different answers. If you add the students, make that 9. And if we ask administration, I think Ray's going to go along with Diane, to be honest with you, but but you're gonna get I'm not sure that's going to be clarifying. If you want personal opinions, as opposed to if you're asking for us to deliberate and rank them, that's a workshop, not a board meeting.
Right, we'd be here all night for sure. Okay, well, why don't we start with non-negotiables and kind of work our way, and just so that we can kind of get our arms around that. Is there anything that anybody has right off the bat that's a non-negotiable for them that we can discuss? We attack it this way.
How
So a
about if we do it
non-negotiable.
let's do it in different categories. There's 3 categories on the slides. Why don't we go category by category?
Sure, we can do that. So we can start with programming needs.
Perfect.
So when you said non-negotiable for them, like, what do you mean by that? Like, are we right now just going through, these are things this next building should have?
Yes, things
All
that
right.
we absolutely as a board feel that must be included in the project for us to support it.
For us to support.
Yeah, so if somebody has one that's a non-negotiable to them, then we can discuss it as a group. And if this is I should have said this in the beginning, this is a non-action item. We're not going to vote on this, but it is, as long as we've got the consensus, I feel comfortable sending it forward to Charlie and letting him know this is where the board's.
It's more discussion based.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly, Mitchell.
So we're not drawing lines in the sand yet.
No.
All right.
No. All right, so on that note, is there anything under programming needs that is a non-negotiable? And of course, I would love to hear from the both of you as well.
I would definitely say like that separate gym and cafeteria. When I recently went to like the 3 schools, and spoke with the building administrators and different teachers there. That's a huge limiting factor to how they can block out their day, what programs they can provide for kids for like gym and let's say lunch as well. That sounded like that's gonna be a huge like step forward and leave the building the room to grow in the future too, if it ever did need to.
I was really compelled last week about the discussion we had around, after school, before and after school care. I've always been a believer that there needs to be separate gym and cafeteria space for your, essentially aligned with what you're saying, Mitchell. But the fact that, we don't have enough space right now, we have a long waiting list of kids, and on the horizon, will we or will we not get pre-K? I don't, I'm not interested in us, making something small, so small in the beginning that 5 years from now, we have to revisit it again already, right? So, I would support that being a non-negotiable.
I also support that as a non-negotiable. It's a huge limiting factor in all 3 of our primary schools. It limits the time our children can have lunch, how specials are organized, and it creates a scheduling nightmare for kids. And then the aftercare program, I think, aftercare is a huge need for every community. I was having this conversation earlier with a fellow board member about how important aftercare is. My family depends on aftercare. And to the extent that we can make sure that our building meets our needs of our families, we need to do that. And if this has been one of the repeating themes that's severely limited programming during the school day and after the school day.
I do agree that a separate gym and cafeteria is pretty imperative as we've seen come up in multiple situations. I think that especially after our workshop last week, I think room for future expansion, whether that be that even just the way that Wentworth is designed, where they put it in a literal physical location where the building is built so that it can be expanded upon when needed. I do have worries that we will build something that is small and we will need to expand upon it. Scarborough seems to be growing. But I do think in order to benefit future Scarborough citizens and students, I think that keeping our eye on the future as well and being able to build something that can expand in the future is very important.
Yeah, I think to Alyssa's point, that room for future expansion is really critical. And that example of, when Wentworth was built, they overbuilt the core spaces and identified space on the footprint where additional classrooms could be built in the future that the core spaces would be able to absorb. That is really important, right? Because if we are building the school for what we need it to be in 3 years, and then we are not having a contingency plan for future growth or just right sizing our core spaces, we're going to find ourselves in a difficult situation, which is the situation that, quite frankly, our primary schools are in currently, right? Because we do not have adequate core spaces, even for the students that we are serving at the current time.
I keep in my head running through the, I think I pretty much indicated last week, I would love a pre-K program. I don't know that it's in the cards right now, but due to the annual ongoing costs, but I'm also interested in slowly rolling out more classes. So I wonder, where I alluded last week is, can we, while we have construction crews on site, can we go ahead and build the classrooms now, knowing they're going to be left empty?
I think the current trouble that the SBAC is running up into that is that we're now in a place where we need to reduce costs. When we built out with everything that kind of could be beautiful and wonderful in these, we were way over budget, and now we're looking for places to bring it back down to a place where the community can support and afford to put up new buildings. I think it would be a hard sell. I agree. I would love to have, you know, if Wentworth isn't at max and still all the space is being used, clearly the educational situation has changed in the past 10 years. We don't have dead space in Wentworth. We are utilizing every inch of it. So, you know, clearly, you know, things will change. I would love to, but it would be hard to add classrooms that just aren't being used, but I can certainly provide that feedback that that space would end up being used.
I'm gonna take it in a different direction. I value pre-K and I would like Scarborough to offer pre-K beyond what we're currently offering, which is severely limited. That being said, if there's a place we're going to compromise, which is what this is, because I would like to have space for pre-K right now, this is a place I can do it. If this is a future need, there are other ways to meet this need. There may be other facilities available depending on which options we go with. There may be, you know, we should be able to expand in the future, but if we have to cut a cost, I would cut the cost of a potential future project over a current dedicated need. And that's not an easy decision. I believe in pre-K. My children went through pre-K. Every child should have the opportunity to attend a quality preschool education if their family chooses that for them. And I think that, you know, I don't think that Scarborough has invested in pre-K the way that many of the towns around us has found a way to do that. And I think that's a problem. But if you're asking me where to cut costs, a place where I can cut costs is a future desired outcome over a current identified need.
Can you help me understand? Last week, I think you said something, Alyssa, that the future, or maybe Charlie said it, the future expansion is on the table for cutting expenses. And I'm trying to understand that in my head, because isn't future expansion just land, like an extra, like a piece of land that won't be developed?
So I think it's kind of a concept more than anything. So room for future expansion, a lot of it's talking about kind of like what Diane was saying, build the core spaces in a way where you can grow. Because it's really hard to add on to a gym. It's really hard to add on to a auditorium, cafeteria, et cetera. So it kind of envelops that, as well as where on this footprint, would we put more classrooms? Where on this footprint would we be able to add? How are we positioning this so that, you know, there's not nowhere to add? But just like with Wentworth, we can put more classrooms on the end. That building was built in a way that kind of with the future in mind. So it kind of,
Right.
it's both of them being put into one sentence.
So it's more that gym and the lunchroom being sized to what the expansion can hold. That's how Wentworth is built.
Yes, and then the other piece is like, if you recall, you know, even thinking about the previous referendum and the schematics that were shared, like, the architects generally do that with like dotted lines on the footprint. And what they do is they make sure that there are no utilities, nothing placed on that future piece of land within the footprint that is being designated for future expansion, right? Because if we think about the middle school right now as an example, you know, people have said, why don't you just build a connector between the sixth grade
Right.
portable
Right.
and the main building? And that is not possible to do because all the utilities are under that driveway between the school itself and the portable, right?
Have to dig
And
all
so
that up,
as
yeah.
you do future planning and plan for future expansion, you are deliberate in ensuring that there is nothing on that parcel of land that is going to impact the ability to do that in the future.
To take it in a somewhat different direction, being on the committee, I do, there's been a lot of talks about our playground and field space aligning to the DOE standards. I'd really like to hear people's thoughts on this. with our 3 primary schools. We're really tight on space and land in the current structures. And some of the addition locations and how the build out would be, we would lose outdoor space. And I have concerns about that. You know, I love kids being outside, having room to be there, having room to play and everything. So I'd really love to hear this board's impression upon that and where we feel it falls on the level of importance.
I have strong feelings, extremely strong feelings about that. Oh, does Jenna, did you raise your hand? Oh, sorry.
Jen has her hand.
Oh, Jenna, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I feel pretty strongly about having adequate space for the kids to play around in the playground. Generally speaking, early childhood, the playground is one of the areas where they have the most unstructured time. This is where they actually do a lot of their learning as well, with just mimicking behaviors throughout the day of what's happening with their families or what's happening in school. This is their unstructured time of play and learning. And I think it's extremely important for them to have that space. And if it's overcrowded, if they don't have enough equipment to go around, it becomes an issue. And it also becomes an issue where you're going to have a lot more staff policing the behaviors out there too. So I think it's really important that they have room to play.
Yeah, I'm
among other
dead
things.
set. Are you finished then? I don't want to cut you off.
Yep, I'm good.
I'm dead set against any decrease in the size of the primary school playgrounds currently. They're inadequate right now as we speak. They do not meet our students' needs. I have 2 kids who just went through 2 of those schools, and I can't wait to get to special ed services. I have 2 kids that went to 2 primary schools. Those playgrounds do not meet our students' needs right now. Taking any playground space from the current primary schools is a non-starter for me, and I will never get behind anything that does that. We are investing in outdoor learning education initiatives right now. We just got a big grant to do that. That's a direction that education is moving, and it's a healthy direction for all of our students. We talk about mental health, getting outside, increasing physical education. It touches behavioral issues are often resolved with better use of outdoor time, and there's so many areas of student development and growth for their basic needs that are dependent on adequate outdoor time, recreation, having breaks, adding in additional like recess times is a huge issue. So making their recess time less valuable and more difficult and impeding their ability to get adequate rest from studies during the day, particularly at that young age, is an absolute non-starter for me.
And I'm not interested in, I agree, it feels weird, right? When we have this big grant, this Molly grant we've received where we're really valuing and indicating that we value outdoor education to then say, well, what about at the lower grades where they really need movement breaks and opportunities to play? Well, they are going to play in the driveway up front where the buses drive, right? So it feels like we're a little disjointed for sure. So I would support that as a non-negotiable.
That's also, I mean, one of the things that we hear a lot about is that there's not enough field and gym space. And so I agree, cutting it just feels short-sighted, like without a contingency plan. It's sort of like we've almost hit every one of these on here.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like every one of them pretty much is a non-starter for us if it's eliminated. Just want everybody to keep all of that in mind when we're moving forward. This is the same stuff that the committee is grappling with in terms of managing these projects.
I have 3 down so far. I have separate gym and cafeteria, supports pre-K immediate or future expansion, playground field areas aligned to DOE standards.
I think the trouble that I have when I look at this list is that everything feels so important.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the
I mean,
problem, yeah.
there's outdoor space is imperative. Like I wish we could be outside so often, But then I also value learning in the library, and I want to see an appropriately sized library where our kids can go and learn and kind of, there's so many on here, and, you know, the benefits of the separate gym and cafeteria are endless, between supporting our families with after-school care, but supporting our staff and students and not turning over a gymatorium a bunch of times, a day, you know. It's challenging, and, you know, we feel that in SBAC all the time, and that's how these are the really challenging conversations that we're having.
And I can talk a little about that. I mean, I'm not sure how we could responsibly cut an appropriately sized library. Like, I'm looking at this list of like I hear that this is hard work. I understand that, but like, we can't have a school without a library that can meet the needs of the students. Like, that's a ridiculous item to ask me to rank. That's just not, you have to have space that's appropriate for the school, or why are you building it? Like, I mean, it's a ridiculous question in some ways. I'm happy to go through it. Special services at each school. My child can't go to my neighborhood school because her special needs cannot be met there. Do you want to know what it's like to pick up 2 children at 2 primary schools at the same time that are 15 minutes apart? You cannot do it as one person. That means I have to hire somebody to pick up my child across town every day. And that's a cost I incur because the school cannot meet the needs of my child at my neighborhood school. So like, not having, you want to bus all the kids, we want to find a basement somewhere and put them in there. We tried that in the 70s, but that's what that question is speaking to. You're going to concentrate special ed services in one location and then just hide all the kids that have special needs and throw them in a corner and ignore them because it's inconvenient that they need extra space and they need extra services, and their behavior is sometimes harder to manage, and that requires space. When a child is not in control of their body because of their needs, that does require extra space to keep everybody else safe, staff and students. You have to have a place to put the other students and staff, and you have to have a place for that child to be managed. And we may not like that children are not always able to control their bodies due to their special needs, but that is a reality that our ed techs and our special ed teachers deal with every single day, multiple times a day, and they have to be able to manage it safely. So if we're going to build schools that are not going to meet the federally mandated requirements that we have for our students, and you're going to ask me to rank that, I will fight you on that every time. It's not fair. It is not fair that my children are not able to go to the same school at the same time. How many other siblings in this district are separated? And just think about how that feels for a family. I was furious when I found out. I love my children's schools. The education they're getting and have gotten at primary schools have been top notch. I have no qualms whatsoever about how they've been treated here. The special ed services are absolutely phenomenal. But the fact that my children had to be separated to receive those services is absolutely infuriating. And it's due entirely to the neglect of this community, of this school system for the last 25 years when they first identified the space needs in those primary schools.
I actually couldn't agree more. And I'm kind of frequently reminding people of the inequality of that. There shouldn't be students who have to be separated from siblings, parents who have to go through that undue stress, you know, everything that you just listed out. This is actually one of my personal non-negotiables, is that every service should be available to every student with the same opportunities. And currently that's not the structure we have. So I would agree that I would put that on my list of non-negotiables.
And that's sort of where we run into without, you know, we're trying to slice off little pieces like extra space, because we don't know what the future holds. And so then you start slicing into other areas. You know, looking at the dedicated art and music spaces, we know how important those are to overall education. And also that without having those dedicated spaces, what happens is you have to take somebody on a, you know, music on a cart, art on a cart, and you got to go in, you got to displace everything in the classroom. You're losing education minutes, actually, valuable education time that are well studied, well understood. So that's what I was kind of saying, like all of these things, ranking them is really impossible. You have to have special services and, just as important as gifted and talented and,
Well, I
you
think
ha-
what I'm hearing is all of the program needs are really non-negotiables for us.
yeah,
Yeah, the schools have to meet the programming needs of our students. I'm not willing to compromise or support a project that does not meet the needs of our students. Then what's the point? Right now, we have things that don't meet the needs of our students. Why spend $100 million on something that's not going to meet the needs of our students?
And I think that's been some of the conversation as of late within the building committee, because I think it's a very diverse group. And as such, there's some people who are very in tune to the price tag. There are other people on the committee who are reminding the team that there will probably be as many citizens in this community that might not support the least expensive project if it only addresses half of the needs, right? And
Mhm.
so Scarborough has an opportunity to right the ship here. And, I've heard the narrative that the community is only interested in doing this one time and not continuing to go back to the well. And so I think it is a very challenging conversation for sure.
And I think a lot of the like frustrations everyone's voicing is why I didn't feel comfortable taking this list and saying, here's our 1 to 20 or here's our 1 to 50, because there's no way. Prepping for this meeting, I just stared at the list and I was like, there's no way I can when there's something like safety and security, it's how do you decide which one is the most safe or the most secure? So I do prefer coming at it from the space of non-negotiable rather than, and we talked about that, but again, I just, this list doesn't contain many things that I feel comfortable saying that the Scarborough students should go without.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and suggest that safety and security might also be one where we find that there's no non-negotiables. I have my biggest issue has all along been the 6th grade access. So I will not that is my hard line in the sand. I will not compromise on that.
Can you clarify, do you mean the removal of the portable use?
Yes. That they should not be walking from a separate building out in the open multiple times a day to the main building to access their classrooms, period. End of story for me. It's dangerous.
And I know there was, I brought up the long-range facility planning meeting minutes from September where we did some discussion on the review. I know there was a quick ask at the beginning of this. That 6th grade portable is at the limit for its electrical service. All plumbing fixtures are aged and there is no local shut off and overall not enough bathroom for the capacity in that
No,
portable.
They have one, right? Correct? They have one?
One for each.
Well, there is one, there is one, the girls' bathroom, I believe, has 3 toilets. And I believe the boys' bathroom may have 2 toilets and 2 urinals, but that is to meet the needs of a student body of 240 students.
Yeah.
So
And
if
one
you have
staff as
a-
well, right?
if-
One staff.
and
bathroom?
one single staff bathroom. So, if you have a break time, I'm not sure how students would be using the bathroom all at the same time.
So that's just to support that. I agree. I think
Mhm.
our 6th grade portable problem needs to be addressed.
And I feel just as strongly about the secure front entry as well.
Let's cut the emergency access because that's legal.
I mean, it's,
These aren't even legal. Like we legally have to be able to get a fire truck to the schools. Like that's not something that we can rank. That's something that you can't get a building permit without. So like, you want me to rank it? Put that at the bottom. I mean, like, you can't build a building without sufficient space for emergency. That's not something you rank. That's not something you even ask if it's negotiable. It's legal. It's illegal to build a building without this. So I'm not ranking it.
What
Well,
is?
that's, I mean, I'm looking at the list and I'm like, are there any things here that, we're asking for extra or for more? Like when I look at sufficient number of student bathrooms. I mean, it's not like we're asking for, okay, the game room and the sauna and, you know, I don't see that on the list. I mean, how do we make, I mean, I can't think of anything that, maybe I could say, all right, maybe the parent drop-off separate area, we could maybe do without something like that, all right, that's fine. I mean, I don't know if anything, they say, okay, we got to get rid of this, would, you know what, hey, we're not going to have big enough kitchens, so every kid in class is going to have to help make lunch because there's room there, but not in the kitchen. And everybody gets a brown bag. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't know if we're going to get behind anything that comes back and doesn't address all of the issues that we have for, not just today, but I'm not saying we have to project out forever, but we have to make sure that what happened at the middle school didn't happen. I mean, I guess we could sit here and go round and round and round and say, oh, well, this and this and this, but at the end of the day, we're not asking for anything more than we need. So if people don't like the fact that it's going to cost more, and we should have done it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and we can't go in our way back machine because we don't have one. So we're stuck with what we have, and we're going to have to figure out a way to make it work. But we're going to do it the right way, and I hope, because I can't support anything that if at the end of the day, if there's one portable left in town, then we've done something wrong, and we can't do that.
I think I think all of your points are well taken, John. There's nothing in here. There's no fluff. There's no gold padded anything in here. This is going to be an unpopular opinion. I'm going to throw it out because it's a thought exercise. Our current classroom ratios for these grades are 16. Yes, 16 students.
16 to 20 is the range. And we have, we currently have K2 classes that are at that, are at the top of the range.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on moving that up a little? What if we made it 18 to 20? What if we played with that number a little bit? I don't know what it's going to get us in the way of money on a project, but might it buy us something? It might be non-negotiable though, like similar to
I also just have a hard time, the students that are coming, there's so many needs at this point. Our, incoming classes, data is showing a significant amount of needs each year. And I have concerns with overloading classrooms and making sure that we're not impacting. So we certainly want to have an environment where we can provide the education necessary, but I don't want to start making compromises with student ratios or staffing ratios and things like that degrade the education that we're able to provide, or our staff being able to feel like they have what they need to do their job. So certainly a lot of things needs come with ed techs and support, and we're going to meet the students' needs, absolutely, but I would be very weary of increasing our ratios to potentially have impacts on the education.
I also think that the conversation about what to do about class ratios is dependent upon what proposals move forward. Because there are, among the proposals to move forward are, to maintain some of the classroom spaces at our current primary schools, which, I believe the board is aware are undersized as it relates to state standards. And so, if we are already starting with a room that has less space than we would expect a modern classroom to be built with, and then we decide to make an amendment to increase class size within those undersized spaces, then you're kind of creating a double deficit, right? If we were moving to a proposal where class sizes were more aligned to current standards, I think that potentially could be a different conversation.
And that has been a discussion, a frequent discussion in the SBAC meetings of, you know, is there an opportunity to not right size the classrooms? So DOE current standards is a kindergarten classroom to be 1,000 square feet and ours aren't there. So do we not right size? Do we leave our kindergarten classrooms functioning as they are? And then we put on additions that will carry the cost, but we don't do some of the major renovations that have been identified in order to meet the DOE current standards.
Has there been any discussion among the committee about meeting all of these needs on the table potentially? I can't recall the cost with the unified school, understanding that the annual costs are going to go down, a consolidated school, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
So that you're giving one to get, right? Like this might be a little bit higher, but these costs go down. So at the end of the day, maybe our ask annually isn't as much.
Yeah, I mean, we have not provided approximate operational costs for all of the proposals at this point, because quite honestly, there are so many proposals and they are morphing week to week, right? As people ask questions and say, can you show us this? Can you show us that? And so our commitment from the district has been that will be in a better position to provide approximations to operational costs once the committee, you know, is solidified around two distinct proposals, right? Because the time, effort, and energy that needs to go into doing those operational costs is nothing to blink at. And quite honestly, I have said to the committee multiple times, if you are interested in getting an idea around operational costs, please go back to the business case that was presented in 2023 before the last referendum, because I think, although you might say that those numbers might be different in 2025, I think that they definitely highlight what is the cost to run smaller schools versus the cost to run a more significant, larger modern day school.
And to that point, I think it is important to stress here that they're not stagnant options. They're kind of ever changing. Last week, you know, committee members came forth and said, what if we merge A and B? And I don't think it would be fair to look at the district and say, okay, now look at yours again. And now we're merging these two, we're changing this, we're altering that. How would that impact? So I think we're still in such a place of fluid options and changes that asking for that level of detail at this point, I think has too many moving parts and runs the risk of putting numbers out there that wouldn't be reflective of where, you know, in such a fluid state we end up.
I hear that, and I'm not asking for numbers with fluid projects. That doesn't make sense. But is there a recognition among the committee when you're looking at projects that one school costs less to operate than four schools and three schools cost less to operate than four schools? And if so, why not?
That's what
And
I'm
if you
getting
want
at.
me to show up and make public comment at your meeting and ask, I'd be happy to do that. But ignoring the reality that we pass a budget every single year with operating costs that continue to skyrocket and not understanding that 4 buildings cost more than 1 building is a math problem that even I can do. I know math in public.
I would
That's
strongly
why
encourage all board members to come to our committee meetings and provide public comment. I think there has been light discussion around that. I don't think that it is an often stressed point. I think that there is a lot of stress on in the committee about how the consolidated school was not supported last time. And we're starting to kind of have more of those conversation, what drove that decision. But I think there's a lot that goes into the conversation, I guess is the only way I can say it. Add anything?
I think the only thing that I can add to that is I do think that people, it's maybe a little bit harder for somebody is involved in those kinds of conversations on every year. Like we talk about this every year. It may not be as obvious. And I think, so Alyssa in particular, it's brought up frequently regarding the operation costs. I do think that there is that difficult conversation as like whoever mentioned that it failed last time, and there's been a lot of back and forth with that. Like particularly what you just said, John, is that it failed, but failed for X number of reasons, and we have some data on that. The number one thing was cost. And so one of the proposals is a consolidated school. It is much lower than the last cost. And it's also smaller in scope. It's a K-2, right? It's K-2 and then an addition at the middle school. That may be a different conversation.
Which option letter is that?
I can't remember. It's D. I think I'm glad you have that.
It is
D, right?
Option D, and it's actually a new K-3.
Oh, it is a K-3.
Option D.
Oh, God, I can't see.
They're very fluid.
Yeah. Even I can't keep it straight without looking at it. So
Yes, the option would be option D, K-3, and then Wentworth becomes 4-6, and then middle school becomes 7-8.
And how much is option D running? Do you have that?
I
in
think
front of
I think the starting one was like 130, right? With the middle school, with some middle school renovation and nothing at Wentworth.
If you give me just a moment,
Yeah.
I'll call up our last
Thank you.
presentation from Harriman. Feel free to talk about other things.
If that school's built as a K-3 school, would there be that space for pre-K in the future, or is there? I know it's early in the process to check in and see where that would be, but would there be that?
Well, depending on the
ability,
proposal.
Or would they use a previous building that we used to use for K-2 as a pre-K?
That's part of the discussion.
So I think that's part of the discussion, but it's also very important, especially if public are rewatching this, to know that despite being current schools, the schools don't own the buildings. It's the town that owns the buildings. So if the schools cease to be schools because they're built or closed for any reason, there's other proposals that are, potentially closing one of the elementary schools to build a different, larger one, but still having 3, et cetera. The building itself goes back to the town. So it would need to be addressed by the town.
Our plan at the last referendum was to ask the town for one of those buildings for use for a pre-K center. So if this committee coalesced around a consolidated school option, I feel confident saying that's something this board would consider doing the same thing again, which would be a request to the town to maintain one of the buildings for pre-K. Can you remind me as well, in the public as well, which solutions were already voted or already off the table?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, absolutely. It's F and E. F was a new K-2 community school. It was K-2, Wentworth would become 3-6, and middle school would stay 7-8. The other one that was eliminated would be having K-5, 2 schools. Wentworth would be made into a K-5, and then again, the primary schools the current neighborhood 3 schools that exist would be closed and moved into a K-5 school as well. And the middle school would additionally be, or would continue to be 6-8.
With an addition.
Yes, the middle school would remain K-8 and receive renovations, and in addition, the portables would have been removed to address safety and security and accommodate the 6th grades. The renovation and additions would also address the missing K-8 program spaces. The 2 K-5 school was hotly contended and was only voted down in a yes to eliminate the option 10 and a no to eliminate the option of 9.
Now, what were the big sticking points for that one to be voted down? Because that was one I personally was like, oh, this might be interesting to see where this goes, but I know that was just.
Well, there was some discussion that it would be possibly cost prohibitive. You know, there were elements of it that may have been able to have been morphed, but ultimately, I think, you know, it was sort of a new and shocking thing. I don't know that the committee, I think it was like, there's 7 options in front of us. We need to start narrowing down. That was one of the higher cost items. That being one of the things, I mean, really, that was sort of like the major
So
piece.
pretty much the cost of it was the big.
Well, yeah, there was sort of a lot of moving parts with that one.
All right.
That and we would have needed to cut the middle school work in order to get it into budget. I'm sorry if you did say that and I was distracted. Shannon, I just don't want to leave you hanging. I'm kind of quickly reviewing the SBAC slides and having trouble coming up with the exact number and don't want to be quoted incorrectly. So I'm happy to get back to you on the current option cost of D, but oh, perfect.
That's what I was. I'm gonna forward the slide deck before so that it, oh, wonderful, Diane's forwarded the slide deck to the board. It's from the 24th, yeah. And if you go down.
Shannon, can you turn your mic on?
Yeah, this is a very big slide there. It looks like if you start on slide 75.
I have page, oh boy.
So if you're looking for the overall cost of option D, which is the option that Alyssa was talking about, that is
Page
on
123.
Slide 123 of 157. But again, you know, I think this is a great slide deck for all of you to, you know, digest at your leisure because it is very robust.
Charlie has his hand up. I'm just, Ray, if you could let him, give him permission to talk. You can invite him into the conversation. Oh, I'm sorry. Charlie, do you have permission to talk if you want to go ahead?
Oh, I was just gonna address the question about why those 2 options were eliminated, but I think Jillian and Alyssa covered it. So.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
But happy to help with any of these other questions. I had to drop off about midway through this conversation, so I've just got back on a couple of minutes ago. So, but if it's all right with you, I can answer some of these questions as they come.
Sure, of course. Spoiler alert, we're not, we haven't taken anything off the list yet
Okay.
for the benchmarks. The problem we're having, I don't know if you heard this part of the conversation, but the problem we're having is that all of these things, there's nothing in here that's fluff or added or the best, you know, the best, the things that we hear, we're not asking for, as John put it, saunas and, you know, game rooms. We're asking for the things that have legitimate needs attached to them. So it's hard to say that any of these things are worthy of being cut. Which I'm sure your committee is having the same conversation or similar conversation.
Yeah, and if I may, I don't necessarily think, you know, you guys need to deliberate on, you know, what's cuttable. Rather, you know, as we start to rack and stack these in the next 2 weeks, the 5 remaining options, and potentially the AB hybrid option that we're looking at now too. Just simply understanding what are the most important pieces of these of the benchmarking? You know, I dropped off around you guys were kind of going through the imperatives or the non-negotiables as you stated it, you know, and I heard some of that's really helpful to us. And then, you know, if we can just sort of have some understanding of, you know, none of these are not important, and none of these should not be included. But what are the absolute most important ones? Because that's going to help us determine, you know, not only if we have to make scope reductions, but also how we select, you know, the best fit that meets the most important needs the best.
And I think that's the trouble we were up against. Everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Charlie, this is Frayla Tarpinian. I'm not on your SBAC committee, which is something you should be thankful for. Because about what I'm about to say. We are not ranking things that are legally required. A number of these options are legally mandated. We're not going to rank things about whether we're going to have an inadequate library in a building. You know, I think the only thing that I was willing to give up on these lists was a future pre-K, because I am willing to sacrifice future wants and desires for current programmatic needs. That's what I said earlier, and I stand by that. But like, these are not things I can rank. I can't rank if we can have enough student bathrooms. I cannot rank if we have enough staff bathrooms. I cannot rank if we have emergency egress to the building. We can't get a permit without that. So like, I am frustrated, not with you specifically, a little bit with the committee as a whole, because every time I hear about an option being cut, I hear about a new option in morphine. It's March. I know you feel the time is ticking, but I'm ready for an answer. And yes, it's hard to fit everything we need into the budget that was arbitrarily placed in this government document. But that's where we're at, and you need to figure out a way to meet all these needs. These are programmatic basic needs. Again, you can cut the saunas, the steam rooms, you can cut the zip line out of the school. You cannot cut whether we have emergency access. You cannot cut whether our entrances are safe. You cannot cut whether we can meet our special ed needs at our schools. And if you, I don't know if you dropped off, but I would like you to listen to my diatribe on meeting special ed needs at schools instead of busing our special ed needs to one school to fit their needs or moving them around because we need to meet the space needs in the schools, because we've shifted the special ed classrooms around 3 or 4 times in the last decade. And that is really difficult for that population. So yes, I'm frustrated. It's not directed to you personally. This is why you're glad I'm not on your committee, but I am not ranking or giving you prioritization on legally mandated things. I'm not compromising the size of libraries so that they're inadequate the day we open. I'm not going to compromise on the playground or field space for the DOE so you can shove another couple classrooms and we no longer have soccer available for our youngest students to run around. Those are not questions about what are we ranking choices and things that we would like to have. Almost everything on this list is an absolute basic minimum mandatory in whatever solution that you come up with. And I understand that we've tasked you with something difficult as I took place with this process for a number of years of my life now. So I hear you that it's difficult, but this is not a list that we can rank. And if so, I rank at the bottom of the list, adequate egress, because you can't get a damn building permit unless you get everything else in that building first.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your passion. I'd ask you to direct that to the voters, right? We're trying to hit a budget that was given to us, you know, by the survey respondents and the community, and so that's why we're in the position we're in of trying to find opportunities to reduce scope. I think though what you've just stated is really useful to us, right? If these are legal mandates, then they're non-negotiables, and mark them as such. That's what I've asked you to do, and I think that you're pointing those out. I don't think everything on that benchmarking is a legal mandate. Frankly, I'm not sure which ones are and which ones aren't. So if you can identify those for us, that's incredibly helpful to us to understand, that these are the non-negotiables, and they must be included in the chosen solution.
I think my problem is, for me, non-negotiables are safety and security and meeting our programming needs. Those are our requirements. And when I say meeting our programming needs, I mean making sure that there's adequate space, making sure we have room for all of our students, making sure that our special services are covered as they are required to be. and when you blanket it in such general terms, all of these fall in there, right? And so I'm trying to find things here and there that I can pick out. Like John, I could probably say, okay, a separate parent bus drop off, you know, perhaps that's one we can drop to the bottom because maybe we can really do a educational push for kids to ride the bus again, or maybe you know, but it feels like we're grasping at straws, I guess, is what I'm, you know, and I'm trying to like find a little thing here and there that's gonna shave a little bit of money, which is why I was getting at. I hope the committee is thinking, and to Diane's point, using the costs of that were outlined in the last proposal, but really kind of looking at, this is the cost of construction, and yes, it might be a little bit high, but what are we going to save in our annual costs? If we have right-sized cafeterias at all of our schools, we no longer have to hire someone to drive meals all over the district, for example. That gets rid of a bus or a van. That gets rid of a staff member in that position. We no longer paying gas, insurance, all the things, right? So I really, really hope that the committee is looking at, this is a construction cost, and yes, we'll be paying for it for a long time, but we can also, there's a give to get there, right? And that give to get is the annual cost that we're saving. And I hope that's being balanced.
And I don't want you to think that we all agree that you can separate the bus loop and the drop off. And I'll tell you why. Because the traffic situation at all of our schools is an
bad.
actual nightmare that takes, you know, the better part of 30 minutes to get through. And the safety of those students getting on that and off that bus while parents are careening through the parking lot trying to get to work is something that is just like sets up a really difficult situation. You know, walking past the bus loop from Blue Point, from the school into the parking lot is sometimes a game of Frogger. And like, that's not something that we need to set up our students for. So again, I know I'm harsh at times and critical, I've been told. And I agree with that assessment, but like, these are not, I am willing to support a building that our community can get behind, but I'm not willing to put my name or my support behind a solution that doesn't meet our needs. And that's just the reality. And there's nothing on any of these lists that we can fudge a little bit. I do understand the construction costs and stuff like that, but like, these are not areas you're gonna save money. So I don't know, you know, I don't know what other tricks you've got, but like, shaving off any of these is not optional. So, you know, good
So
luck with that.
I'll do respect. I disagree. I don't have the benchmarking standards in front of me. I apologize for that, but I know there's at least, right, portables. If you could tell us, is it okay to maintain a handful of portables if we must? Obviously we don't want to, but separate gym and cafeteria. I heard the beginning of the conversation around that. That's not a legal requirement. Is that you know, does the board consider that, you know, a non-negotiable? Those types of things are the things that we're looking for, not to downsize the project to a school that's not a solution, but to, as I mentioned, you know, try to get to the best possible solution within the budget that you know, all the data indicates that the community will support. You know, that's the limiting factor. And so, you know, that's what we're working towards, is to present you guys at the end of this with a solution that solves for the most problems we have and that we think will pass at a referendum. And so, you know, that's what we're asking for.
Regarding we've heard that busing is getting more and more difficult. So I think it's future looking to ensure that we have those adequate spaces. I mean, I just think it would be so short-sighted to have to go back and try to retrofit that anywhere. I just think it's irresponsible for a safety measure. Adequate like heating and cooling. I mean, we saw today how, you know, well, maybe, but you know, in the event that kids were overheated, like that could happen in any of those buildings because of the or, the old systems in place. And, our climate's getting hotter. We're having more and more hotter days. So, I mean, I just think, we don't have to have the top of the line, but we have to have something that is, safe and efficient
Yeah,
and
I mean,
works.
To add on to that, Jillian, I would, inform the board now that when you look through this slide deck that we've shared with you, option A and option B, which propose rehabbing our current primary schools, do not include insulating them. That is an extra add-on cost. It does not include cooling, putting any cooling systems in there. That is an additional add-on cost.
Which I think it's important to also call out that we did have a discussion during SBAC about the way two of our buildings are heated and cooled. If we're talking about operation costs and efficiency, Wentworth is heat and cooled by 11 heat pumps. The middle school that was not built with it is over 100, well over 100, difficult to maintain. Not, Wentworth has a workroom that they can maintain and manage those things so that if Todd and his crew need to do work on those, they can do it without disrupting the students. And it doesn't become kind of crews throughout the schools. So I think even, how's it worded? Improved heating and cooling efficiency. I think if we start to cut even things like that, you start to own it more when you buy over 100 heat pumps versus having it as a part of the build. So even in the places where someone may look, especially when there are students that require heating and cooling, well, I mean, everyone requires heating in Maine. Let's talk about that. But even cooling is required for some students. So it's not an option. It's not something that can be taken away on certain situations.
Given the climate as it currently is, we're likely to get to a place where we're not allowed to have students in buildings if it gets hot enough. And I'm talking about those shoulder seasons, so the Septembers and the Junes. And there are days that are getting hotter and hotter, and there's a certain threshold at which it would be unsafe to keep students in a classroom without access to cooling. So again, we have to have adequate heating and cooling systems. We can't compromise on providing the basic needs to our students.
Regarding what Charlie said about separate gym and cafeteria, and to me, I think that those are definitely ideal, but having the right size, I mean, if we were to keep the 3 elementary schools, even having the right size without separating them becomes difficult. Again, because adding on is difficult. I mean, I'm having a hard time articulating what I'm trying to say at this point, but
I think the other kind of way that the SBAC committee is looking to potentially help with costs is to kind of offset some of them. If we address this, can we bump out? So option C, I'm looking at a note here, other cost saving considerations. Do we defer all middle school scope and address it in years to come? So there are, we're looking at a number of different ways. Are there ways to address current needs now and put others towards, later referendums or later choices? Are there, I agree that I feel personally that the 6th grade portable is not at a point of being an option anymore. So I would not support a referendum that does not address that directly at this time.
And is the cost to replace portables still upwards of $1 million per portable?
I apologize, I don't know that number.
It's for 2,
For
but
two.
if you do one, you have to do the second, yeah.
So
And the thing with portables, like, I guess maybe we go ahead and talk about that right now. The thing with portables is that they're always meant to be a temporary solution. They're not meant to be a permanent solution. So I guess if the question Charlie's asking us is, are we okay to use them? Like, my personal answer would be yes, but yes, for a temporary solution for those bubbles that come through the district, right? But what we're doing is we're using them, and then because we have to keep them, we keep them, right? But they need replacement, they need updates, like it's, I feel almost like sometimes we're opening the window and throwing the money out, right? And I have a hard time wrapping my head around how are we going to continue with the portables? How is that, again, comparing the operating ongoing costs with the construction costs, and how can we do that? Like, how can we have a solution where we all know that the current schools are heating the outside? How can these solutions not account for insulation?
And just to put some dates to it so that we all understand, the Scarborough Middle School, modulars were all added between 2000 and 2008. And the primary schools have been added, as early as 2001 and as late as 2020. So it is a growing and maintaining. And again, I kind of referenced earlier, those 6th grade portables were at max capacity for electrical. So like we are,
I guess for me, if I have to rank something, I'm gonna tell you that I think safety is my, probably more important to me than programming needs, because our parents trust us with their kids day in and day out. And I would like to be able to look a parent in the eye and say, yes, we care about your child's safety, and this is how we demonstrate that we care about your child's safety. And so if I rank that as my number one priority, the 6th grade portables have to go.
I just don't understand why we would maintain a temporary solution that we're gonna have to expend millions of dollars on in the near future to maintain. Like that, like the portables, if we're gonna build a permanent solution for this problem right now for schools that are lasting upwards of 50 years, why would we ignore a problem that has an expiration date that's ticking right now, that we're at the best a quarter of the way through the lifespan of, and at worst past the lifespan of in many instances? So like, do I mind maintaining portables if they fit a need right now? No, but not if we're avoiding a project that has to happen, because you know what we're not gonna do is pass another referendum in 10 years. That's highly unlikely. And so if we don't address it, it's not gonna, then we're gonna have to expend extraordinary amount of funds maintaining and replacing these portables.
see, and for me, I feel the portables can be used during the construction process, get us through construction. That's really important. If we're short of building a new building and not disrupting anything, at some point, these kids are gonna need to be somewhere while something's being built and renovated. But I just can't get behind a temporary solution. And especially with the age of ours, it's just too much.
I think that there's some pretty good general consensus around making sure that the middle school is addressed here. I think it's important that we say loud and clear that that is not negotiable.
Well, whether we address it through this project or whether we have to buy a whole new suite of portables, the middle school portables have to be addressed.
Well, and I can give you an example, like if you look at option D, which supposes that we move the 6th grade to Wentworth, we would need to build we would need to build classroom space there. The core spaces could absorb the addition. And that, to move the 6th grade to Wentworth comes at a cost of $9.5 million. So to your question, how much would it be to replace the portables and build a new portable building, right? We're talking at least $6 million for that. So, in the scope of overall costs and what you're getting for your money, that is just, that's an example.
I feel like, portables, they don't seem fiscally responsible. When we're in this process of needing to build and needing to, house our kids in a way that portables just don't feel fiscally responsible, especially, maintaining them as permanent structures.
Well, I'm not sure that this is super helpful. Charlie, I think you, I think everybody here is pretty passionate, probably as a, again, a similar makeup to what you're seeing on your committee. It feels, I can imagine and I can appreciate that it feels like we're asking you to do a very big lift and it's a very hard ask. And I appreciate that tremendously. I guess if we have final thoughts here that we want to share, it sounds to me like portables are non-negotiable. Does that feel right? It feels like safety and security is non-negotiable. Does that feel right to everybody? It feels like programming needs are non-negotiable. I think that also feels right to everybody. Again, I would ask you as a committee, and I know it's hard, given that Diane says that the district is committed to giving operational costs when you get to 2, but I would really, really encourage the committee to use the numbers from the last referendum and take a look at those operating numbers and see if you can make them work for these solutions and really compare annual costs to construction cost and see where you get. Does that feel like something that can be done? With the numbers that were from the last referendum, can they be manipulated to fit into these current?
I don't even think it's a matter of manipulating them. I think it's a matter of looking at them because, basically what they do is they provide a comparison of what is the cost of maintaining multiple schools of various sizes versus having fewer schools, right? That are of a different vintage, right? Because at some point in time, it's kind of comparable to if you think about as a homeowner, do you choose to renovate your 50-year-old house? Or do you choose a new build? And what are the reasons around why you might choose to do one or the other?
And I think there's a lot that can be learned that it doesn't necessarily carry numbers, but I think it sounds like the last referendum did a lot of studies with bus studies, and they did, it's custodial wise cheaper to maintain one larger building to multiple small, like we can't necessarily put specific numbers to it, but at this point, we can be looking at a lot of the knowledge that was gained through a lot of that work and how we can apply it to these situations before we're at a place where we have 2 or 1 when the district's ready to really be diving into those options.
Yeah, and I almost wonder, not that I want to volunteer anybody, but is Dave still on your committee who was on finance last year? I'm trying to remember the list.
Yes, he's a part of our leadership team.
Yeah, I wonder, okay, so let me just walk through, I'm thinking as I'm talking. So you have in these solutions that are in front of you, you have number of classrooms, yes? You have a known number of classrooms?
It's fluid, but yes.
Okay, and we can estimate, what a teacher's salary and benefits are. We have those numbers with our contract.
It's in negotiations, but yes.
Yes, we have a rough number. Yeah, we don't know. We know, maybe we can glean how many custodian. What I'm really worried about, like, I'm not worried about getting into what electricity is gonna cost and heating is gonna cost and all the things. I'm interested in looking at and drawing a number about personnel. Personnel is our biggest cost. So the reason I'm asking about Dave is because I remember from phase 1, he was really good with spreadsheets and numbers. And I wonder if it's worth an exercise to take the number of classrooms and do some back of the napkin math to come up with understanding it's a very rough estimate without any information from the district, just at least something.
I mean, I appreciate your idea, Shannon, but I would argue with you that it is not back of the napkin math, and that a lot of what is on the table here is not just about classroom teachers. We're talking about supports for students, interventions, right? So again, when you look across these 5 options plus another one that is, being contemplated, each one of those has a unique set of expectations around what type of special ed programming will be offered at that location versus this location. How many intervention teachers do you need if you have this proposal or that proposal? There is a lot of detail, and my concern about doing the back of the napkin math is once you put a number out to the public, that is the number that they are hearing. And then as we drill down and say, here are the 2 proposals that we are moving forward and drilling down to with a level of detail, and we come out with a different set of operational numbers, that is not going to sit well with some members in our community, because they will say, I heard you say on X date that it was this much money. And so, I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud here or difficult. I am actually trying to make sure that the information that we are putting out to our public is an actual reflection of what we are asking them for.
And I don't feel fair asking a community member to do it without the support or backing of the district, because I just don't think that anyone truly knows what it takes to run a school or a district unless you're truly doing it. So even though we can say a classroom should have a teacher, who's to say that they don't need an ed tech and et cetera, et cetera. Without the support of the district, I don't think we can come forward with even a proper back of the napkin.
And just to piggyback on what Diane is saying, we took a lot of heat for not putting any numbers on the last survey, but that's exactly why. I mean, if we put a number of 113 million or 140, whatever, on those projects, and then some got whittled down and we come out with a completely different number the next time. It's just not going to go over well, and they're not honest numbers at this point because things are changing so much. I think I really do think it's important to have the most accurate numbers when we go out with them. But I think people can figure out, if we have 3 buildings and we have 12 kids that need ed techs, if there's 6 at one and 2 at another, I think that's going to be more staff than if they were at one building and we can move people around in a more efficient way. I mean, that is shown in those numbers from the last referendum.
Yeah. All right, well. So, and the bottom line here is portables. Portable
that-
safety programming.
And we get 2 minutes before 9:30.
Yeah, I'm gonna move on unless there's any final.
No.
So it's all necessary. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anybody wishing to make public comment about this item? Okay, we have one person raising their hand. So what I'm gonna do is, can you flip over so I can see who that is, Ray? Oh, thank you. Debbie, before I, get to you, what I would like to do is, entertain a motion to extend our time. We are coming up to 9:30, and if I give Debbie 3 minutes for public comment, we'll be beyond. So, do I have a motion to extend beyond 9:30, business beyond 9:30?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Can you call the vote, please?
Yes.
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 Ms. Peterson,
Yep.
Rockstad,
Yes.
Martini,
Yes.
Martini House,
Yes.
Fletcher,
Yes.
Mr. Skinner.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, Debbie, can we give her permission?
Okay, Debbie, you have 3 minutes. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start our timer, and since you can't see it, I'll just let you know when your 3 minutes is up, if that's okay.
Thanks, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Debbie Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I'm a newer resident. I've lived in Scarborough with my husband for 9 years. I'm 69 years old, so I didn't raise my children in Scarborough, but I did raise children. And I know you guys know this. I've listened to every school building committee meeting, starting with the first group and then the second group. And I, as a newer member, had to learn what the demographics are of Scarborough. And I know you all know this, but we have a significant percent of seniors on fixed incomes, and your wealthiest taxpayers are not voters, because those are the people who own the summer seasonal homes. And I just strongly encourage each of you as a school board member, because, for instance, tonight was in the public. I think for anyone on the school board to say, I'm not going to support whatever the school committee comes up with, you know, because if they don't do this and if they don't do that and if they don't do this, is really foolish, because this school committee is very representative of the community in which we all live. And you may not like it and I may not like it, but that's the reality. And, you know, saying things like, oh, a cafeteria and a gymnasium are mandated, I mean, it sounds foolish. And I encourage you not to go there, because it gets really negative and people don't like it. Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to make public comment this evening? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to 14.0, continuing business. 14.1 is the second reading of the 2025-2026 school calendar. Rayla.
This is the calendar that we looked at last meeting. There are no changes. We didn't get any feedback about this calendar. Just as a reminder, it would bring us, the last day of school would be the Friday, June 12th. Any snow days would take us into the next week, but on June 17th would be our final day no matter what. That's 3 snow days. After that, we would go into asynchronous school days on any additional snow days, which is the position we find ourselves in right now. If we have any more school days that are snow days, they would be asynchronous learning days. With that, we didn't get any other additional comment on this calendar, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise, it's what you looked at last time.
All right, are there any questions for Freyla? Anyone wishing to make public comment? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the second reading of the 2025-2026 school calendar as presented?
I'll move.
Second.
Can we call the vote, please? Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Leon,
Yes.
Ms. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Rockenstein,
Yes.
Mr. Penny,
Yes.
Keaton Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Fletcher,
Yes.
Ms. Christina.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Agenda item 15.0 is adjournment. If with no objections, we will adjourn at 9:33 p.m. Thank you so much and have a good evening.